Good evening and welcome to the FITT Show. Financial information for today and tomorrow. I'm Bobby Kinzer,
And I'm Thomas Doty.
and we are the FITT Show, helping out people get their finances in shape. How you doing today, Dope?
I am doing fantastic.
You're looking absolutely marvelous. And remember, it's not how you look, it's how you feel. But you do look marvelous, I must admit. Dope, got a lot going on, man. Once again, our favorite subject, stock market. But last week we had some good information. We talked about financial tips that won't learn in school. Got a lot of great responses from that. But today we're going to be talking about a little bit different. We're going to take it down a little different road. We always talk about savings and investing and growing your wealth. But today we're going to talk about, should you be putting your savings in tax deferred accounts? But before we get into that dope, let's get into this favorite subject at the top of the market. Oh, before I go any further, I'm sorry, I must first make sure we get people to understand our disclaimer. We're not financial advisors. Want you to also to click on the thumbs up button as many times as you can and the heart button. That helps gives us traction to reach more people. That's how our algorithms work in Facebook and also out there on YouTube. Please subscribe and share our actual station. There's a lot going on, Dope, and just want to make sure remember that you click on that button. There's a lot going on, Dope. So let's talk about that market, man.
Yeah, and again, we try not to get too excited when the market goes up or get too down when the market goes down. But this was another decent week on the market. The Dow is up 197 points, about a little over 0.5%, which is it's always good. It's going in the right direction. NASDAQ was up over 700 points, which is about a 6% increase. The tech stocks have done really well. Microsoft's up 8 points in that period, 3%. Tesla's made a pretty good move. It's up 83 points, almost 10% increase. Apple's up about 6% or 9 points, and Pfizer's down just a point. But it's kind of funny because the stocks I hold in my Fidelity account, they rank how the street feels about the stocks that I hold, and they're bearish. They're bullish on the stocks I hold, but they're very bullish on Pfizer, which is kind of interesting. So there's all kind of things that, of course, that I don't know, but I'm just happy to hear that the general consensus on the streets is that Pfizer is expected to do well in the future. The next thing I want to, before you go to crypto, Bob, I want to talk about just the market. I got a very interesting note from Fidelity about, hold that slide, Bob. A very interesting note from Fidelity just about what the negative GDP numbers mean. And they, everyone feels that if you have two negative GDP growths, 2 quarters that have negative GDP growth, then that indicates a recession. And that's part of the formula, but it's not all of it. There's other things that are involved in that. And predicting a recession is next to impossible. And I think some of it is the media and, wanting to get people's attention talking about a recession. Obviously it does. And there's the Republicans, of course, want to build that up just to try to make the current administration look bad. But all the news isn't as bad as it is. I know inflation has been going crazy, gas prices have been going crazy. And it's kind of funny because the bond market, usually when the stock market is going negative, the bond market is doing better. But in this case, the bond market is also down 8.8 in the same period. And so the fact that there was 2 negative quarters of growth kind of has everyone on alert. But the thing you got to remember, GDP is a backward-looking indicator. So it doesn't always tell you what's going to happen in the future. And there's some other things that aren't going as bad as there were. I mean, people are starting to think that inflation may have peaked. Things have started to moderate a little bit, and the job market is pretty strong. Earnings have still been coming in fairly well. They're not expected to come in as good as they did last year, but again, most of the companies are still doing well. Gas prices have started to moderate, and we just need some good things to start happening, and that could be, the Fed's interest rates could start to have the expected effect on inflation, and we can see that temper a little bit. And so, even though slower growth is discouraging, it's not really, things aren't really that bad. There's a lot of positive things out there. Take a look at this chart, and again, it's just a warning, not a warning. It's an indication that you really don't want to bail on the market while, just because you've heard the news about two negative quarter growths in GDP, or that didn't come out right. Two quarters of negative growth in GDP. If you look at this chart, what it says is, if you go back to 1953 and you look at the growth following 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, this is the return on the S&P in the months following. So the first level says 3 months after that 2 quarters of negative growth, the market's up 3%. 6 months, the market's up 12%. 9 months, 18, on and on and on, from 26 to 35 to 36 months following 2 quarters of negative growth, the market's up 46%. So now is not the time to bail. We always talk about hanging in for the long run. I think what Fidelity is trying to say in their newsletter to their clients is that there's a lot of things going wrong, but there's some reason to be optimistic and to stay invested, try to hang strong. Now, you can still do some things within the market. We talked about I-bonds. You might want to consider real estate or things that do good in inflationary times. But just wanted to let you know that things may not be as bad as they say, and hopefully things are starting to turn for the better.
Right. But there's a lot of things to consider out there, though, because like we said, a lot of people just look at things myopically sometimes and don't look at the full benefits of the market, or not just the full benefits, sometimes some of the negatives. So we need to look at the whole picture. That's what we're trying to get one to understand. Getting into our, maybe before I go to our topic of the day, I need to give the cryptocurrency update. The cryptocurrency market, which is a big market, over 18,000 cryptocurrencies now. We tend to like to focus on the top 10. But last week, the cryptocurrency market cap was at 1.1 trillion. It's still at 1.1 trillion, but Bitcoin last week was at $23,796 per Bitcoin. Today, at 7 p.m., it was down to $22.672. So I don't know what's going on there. We don't know fully what drives cryptocurrency. It's definitely sentiment, but I know a lot of times people selling off, big sell-offs causes the price to go down, but then sometimes fluctuation happens because just people moving money to do different things. So we never really know. That's the whole speculative position about cryptocurrency. Really don't know what totally controls it, but that's why we kind of keep an eye on price and the market cap. So it's down today, but it's still the number one cryptocurrency out of all the cryptocurrencies. Last week, the market cap was at 456 billion. Today is at 433. So either somebody's selling off or somebody's cashing out, one or the other. But remember, we always talk about the long play. So, I want to get into our topic today. A lot of people talk about tax deferred accounts when we were first introduced to those in like the 80s. And then all of a sudden the Roths came on the street, and a lot of people are confused. So today we want to have a conversation, you all, that should all your money be in tax deferred?
Yeah, it's interesting, Bob. What investment you hold matters, okay? And it's good that, what we're trying to do is get people to save more, invest, and try to build wealth. And that's kind of the first step. It's just getting into the mindset of saving. And then you got to start thinking about where you're saving. And the tax deferred versus after tax can really make a difference in how you generate wealth. And it's a tough decision. It's hard. It's not simple. And the basic premise of tax advantaged accounts or tax deferred is that you don't want to pay taxes now. Theoretically, you'll be in a lower tax bracket in the future, and that's when you'll pay the taxes. And it's interesting. There's so many variables in that situation. Like right now, the tax rates are at historically low levels, but that could change. A lot of the tax laws that are currently in effect are set to expire, I think, in 2025. And if the Democrats have their way, I'm sure they're going to change the tax structure. And if the Republicans get back in, it'll probably change again. So you got to make a decision based on what you think the tax rates will be in the future. And so it's no straightforward answer for anybody of what to do. And this is a situation where you may require some professional help, but at a minimum, you need to understand what some of the ramifications are of tax deferred. And that's what we're going to talk about. And just to give you a little example of what I went through when I was doing this, about say 20 years ago, I had I'm trying to save for college. I got 4 kids. I'm trying to put a lot of money away to get ready for the kids to go to college. So I took full advantage of tax advantage accounts. I saved most of my money before taxes. I was in a pretty high tax bracket at the time. And so to maximize how much I saved, I maxed out my savings plan in tax deferred. So I wasn't paying any taxes, and the savings of not paying any taxes, in my mind, I was also investing that. And so that worked for me. And right now, of course, I have a lot of money that hasn't been taxed yet, that has to be taxed before I can withdraw it. And it's no, again, like I said, no boilerplate answer of what works for everybody. Some people might say, well, I'd rather save after tax and pay the taxes, and then I don't have to worry about it in the future. But I chose to do what I did. I'm happy with the choices I made. I thought it out and figured out what I thought was best for me. Now, I have no idea what the tax situation is going to be in the future. I still have a pretty healthy income from my pension, Social Security, and investments, but it's not like you can totally avoid paying taxes, because you have to. And Bob and I don't talk about tax avoidance. We talk about minimizing your taxes. So that's a little bit about work for me. I'm sure Bob's situation is totally different because everybody's situation is different. How'd you do yours, Bob?
Well, Doug, before I get into my personal strategy, and early on, the thoughts was tax deferred because the theory was you're going to be now retired in a lower tax bracket. But what's been happening, though, a lot of people did well in their 401k plans, way better, despite the change in the tax rates being lower. You know what I'm saying? They were still earning so much more money that it was putting them in a much higher tax bracket that they thought they're going to be retiring at. And I mean, that's a lot of people. Matter of fact, I was one of them. But what I did exactly like what you said. And early on in the 80s, I started putting in money, and I started the FDIC in '87, I think it was. and I started immediately putting money in. But I didn't immediately max out, but in a couple of years, about a year to when I realized what was going on, I not a couple of years, for the year, I was maxing out every year with the maximum contribution I could make. So for me, the majority of my gains came from investing in my 401k plan. I mean, I made over $1 million because I started so early meeting the match. And then when I got over 50, I was doing the catch up also, and it made a difference. The other thing I did, though, was to take advantage of those tax deferred. Was actually, this is not in tax deferred. This is going to be tax free. Was as soon as Melody was born, we started putting money into the 529 plan. And Maryland's my 529 plan. And every state has a different plan administrator, but Maryland has T. Rowe Price, and so did the FDIC, and they were good. See, the FDIC had two pension plans. They had the thrift savings plan, which is government, because we're an independent agency. We were able to invest in that. But we had a choice also to be into the FDIC's personal 401k plan, which was administered by T. Rowe Price. So that's what I did, though. I got into both, and both was matching 5%. So I was getting a 10% match. So I did that and got into the 529 for Melanie, and then the taxable accounts, which there are advantages to taxable accounts. So we're going to talk about it in a minute. I was really into penny stocks. I was doing a little bit of trading into penny stocks, and I was in individual stocks. And we're going to talk about the advantages of taxable accounts because those, fall under, some of them fall into the capital gains category, which is way less taxes than ordinary income. So those are things I try to take advantage of, dope. And even, God, and even I learned earlier about municipal bonds and things like that, which was tax exempt. So we want to talk about those things, but those are some of the things that I actually did, dope. And the interesting thing is that whether it's a taxable or tax advantage investment account, you can get different tax treatment. But also we're going to talk about the different types of investment income, because the strategy of divvying up your assets really depends on how you structure it. And it's called asset location, not asset allocation. But they talk about strategies, they call it asset allocation. We're going to be using a lot of information that we get today from the Kiplinger article. We do a lot for Kiplinger because we think they're very, very, they show both sides. They're not one-sided. They're pretty comprehensive. So we use a lot of information from Kiplinger. And today we're going to be talking about that, which they talk about asset location, different than asset allocation, just meaning where you put your money, in certain accounts to lower your tax bill. It's called asset allocation.
And Bob, Kiplinger isn't trying to sell anything. That's the thing I like about
the
that.
good thing, right?
And a lot of the other things you read about from different publications, they're trying to sell, like they're trying to push you to roll over your IRAs into 401 into a Roth, mainly so they can get your business. But and they make it like you've already paid taxes and you're going to pay taxes again. Well, you didn't pay taxes on money on the first time, so of course eventually you have to pay taxes on that money. It's just a matter of you trying to figure out when to minimize it. And it's like we say, there's so much we didn't know. This in my case, I did some things, and I say I thought it out. Some of it was luck. I got to admit what I was doing, because I really didn't know. I had not been through that before. I had not ever been a high wage earner. Several of the years I maxed out in the how much you could put in the IRA. So I was forced to save some money after tax. And there were probably some things I could have done better. And so that's what we're trying to get you to understand. So you know what to do, you have a plan, and you can minimize the tax bite and maximize your growth in your funds.
Because everybody heard about tax deferred, especially in the 80s. That's what they were telling everybody. And remember, they got everybody from defined contribution plan to defined benefit plans that got us on to defined contribution plans, which are 401k plans, 403b. But the general
that sucks for pension
sucks.
people.
It really
That's
did.
terrible. Yeah,
Dope.
because
I mean,
that's
go
the
ahead.
only advantage, Bob, to being old is that I got a pension. That's the only
Right.
advantage I found of being old. Because most young people don't have pensions. That's the only one. There's no other advantage to being old. Trust me.
Nope. My greatest advantage to being older, for the most part, though, don't work for everybody. But I am totally much wiser than I was at 20. And they say if you take everything you know right now and tell it to a 20-year-old, they still would just get 10%. So there is advantage being old as far
Now,
as
I'd
wisdom.
rather be young and dumb than old and wise. Trust me.
That's a dang good shame. But just remember, the general thought, you all, is to hold less tax efficient investments in tax shelter or tax-free accounts such as ours, employee sponsored plans like the 401k or Roth or either, and then to put tax efficient assets into a taxable account, like we talked about the ones that like stocks, individual stocks, where you get advantage of capital gains as far as being taxed to your personal income. But now, all of this depends whether it's tax deferred, tax free, tax exempt. It always comes back to your financial situation and what is your financial plan. Because actually, retirement really, though, you know what most retirement really is all about? How you manage your tax allocation, how you manage your tax situation. That's really what retirement is really about. So the other thing is you must depend on how much money you have first and foremost. And then the time frame. You need to also look at your cash needs. We always talk about emergency funds. And then, what type of investor you are. Do you buy? Are you one of those buy and hold investors? Are you an active trader? There's so many other things to be considering when you started managing your taxes for your retirement. And we're going to get into some of these considerations because these tax considerations should be driving the decisions that you make. And you need to have well thought out decisions on your asset location plan because you can reap many benefits. And we're going to try to address some of those. So we're going to try to tackle.
Hey,
Yes.
and about one more thing, and if you don't make the right decisions, or if you don't know all the ramifications, you can get whacked with some pretty hefty tax penalties.
Yes.
So it's very important that you understand what you're doing. You understand all the ins and outs and ramifications of how your money works if it is tax deferred.
So today we're going to try to tackle just some of the strategies with the long-term view and break down like tax deferred accounts, tax-free ones, and of course, taxable accounts.
Okay, so let's start off talking about what a tax deferred account is. That's a traditional IRA or 401k plan at work where the money grows tax-free. You put the money in pre-tax, which means you don't pay tax on it. For example, if you make $50,000 and you put $10,000 a year into your company's 401k plan on a pre-tax basis, your taxable income will not be $50,000, it will only be $40,000. So you also lower your tax rate, and the money also grows tax-free. So you only pay tax on the money when you withdraw it. And you have to understand, if you withdraw that money before you're 59 and a half, you also have to pay a penalty. Now, there are some exceptions, but I'm not going to get into those because that's something you should talk to a tax professional about. But there are hardship exceptions where you can take your money out where you may not have to pay taxes. Okay. And because all the taxes are deferred to retirement years, any realized gains or any appreciation of sales of stocks, all that stuff is grows tax free. You don't pay tax on it; it compounds over time, and it's a key reason why that money can grow. And like Bob said, it grows in this bull market we've been in for quite a long time. That market has grown really crazy. So having all your money in a tax-deferred plan or a tax-free retirement account could be the best asset location, okay? And if you think about a real estate investment trust, that's another, that works well in a tax-deferred account because the dividends are taxed as ordinary income. And so you can park alternative funds there too, because they tend to generate a lot of capital gains. And if it's in a tax-deferred account, you don't have to pay tax on those at that particular time.
So we want you to understand this too. We're not tax accountants. Okay, so you definitely need to when the information that you get from people and you get from us, you also need to run it by your tax accountant, just to to help, because we don't know your personal situations. But Dope, we have a person on here now. His name is Joe Finelli. Now, Joe Finelli is the tax man. Joe Finelli worked in the asset area at the FDIC for years, but he's retired now and he had his own tax business. And actually, he helped me with information with my international taxes. So, Joe, welcome aboard. And if you have some comments, please put them in the comments box, Joe, to help us along while we talk about, because you just came on, Joe, we're talking about tax deferred and tax-free and taxable accounts. So now let's talk about, don't just talk about tax deferred. Let's talk about taxable accounts. Now, taxable accounts, obviously, you've already paid your money into taxable accounts. So you're only on taxes on the profit. But taxable accounts, they offer some flexibility and tax advantages that tax advantage accounts don't. Because in taxable accounts, you can actually offset your realized capital gains with realized losses with a strategy called tax loss harvesting. And inherited assets, though, in the taxable accounts get stepped up in cost basis to the value on the day of the original owner's death. For instance, you inevitably, dying is going to happen, but you need to also make sure you understand if you have accounts, taxable accounts that were transferred to you, that sometimes, not sometimes, those capital gains that the heirs had, they may disappear when they transfer over to you because they may step them up, meaning that if they pass the gains over to you, that you might have to pay a higher taxes. Another thing you need to consider is the buy and hold, investors. Stocks work well, but any gains on stocks, and taxable incomes for that matter, held for more than the preferential tax rate of 0, 15, and 20%, meaning short-term capital gains. We talked about this before. If you hold them for 1 year or less, they're going to be taxed as ordinary income. And that's why you'd be careful, because you active stock traders should consider limiting that taxable activity to tax shelters. And then a lot of people don't understand this, though, about dividend stocks, because a lot of dividend stocks, their payouts, which has some of them have particularly large dividend payouts, they get taxed at the favorable 0, 15%, and 20% tax rate too. So depending on your income, which makes them sensible holdings, be tax wise in taxable accounts. But they really help you because they're taxed at capital gains tax rates. Depending on your income, it could be 15%, or if you have a higher income, it could be at 20%. One last one, Dope, that in taxable accounts is ETFs. A lot of people are in their ETFs these days, which are exchange traded funds. Now, whether they hold stocks or bonds, they're also right for taxable accounts. But many index funds, like ETFs, which tend to generate less capital gain distributions, we talked about that before, compared to actively managed mutual funds, they're usually are more tax efficient. So consider ETFs as a tax structure that can help you too. They pay a little bit less taxes because of the capital gains distributions.
Okay, let's talk about tax-free accounts. Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks, they hold post-tax money. So you don't get a tax break on what you contribute, okay, like you do on an IRA, on a pre-tax basis. But the money in a Roth account accumulates tax-free, and all withdrawals are tax-free as long as you're at least 59 and a half. And if it's a Roth account, it has been open for at least 5 years. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail a little bit later. And that makes aggressive investors, this active traders with big short-term gains, which are taxed as ordinary income, and aggressive investments best for Roth accounts. That includes growth stocks or funds that invest in them, or stocks in high volatility asset classes such as emerging markets and small company stocks. Okay, REITs and dividend-paying stocks are also good for Roth accounts. Dividend stocks get preferential tax treatment in a taxable account, but in tax-free accounts, you avoid the tax altogether. So it makes sense. Then you got tax-exempt accounts, and you don't report anything on your taxes. Those are municipal bonds, but just be careful that even though municipal bonds can be free of federal taxes, you got to pay attention because there may be state, local, or both also on those. And so just be careful that you know and understand whether your state taxed those municipal bonds or not.
Yeah, that's very key information though, because a lot of people didn't know that understanding between taxes and tax free. They all free of taxes, but it's how you report them. So, though, let's get into the conversation. Now, remember we said there are three main categories in managing your taxes for retirement. And we just talked about them: tax deferred, taxable, and tax free. Just remember that. Those are the buckets you want to actually, the other bucket is, those are the three buckets. That's it. That's all you need to really think. And it all depends on your financial situation. You remember, you can't avoid Uncle Sam. We pay our taxes. And a lot of people don't. Do you know the best way to beat taxes? Is to make more money. Give Uncle Sam his 22, 24%, whatever bracket you're in, and take the rest of yours. Don't be afraid to get tax implications. Just understand the key of trying to minimize your tax implications. That's what we're trying to talk about. You can't avoid taxes. You can't. You're going to have to pay because you want your streets to be paid. You want the fire department. You want the police to answer your calls. These are all things we're paying for. That's why I understand people get pissed off about paying taxes, especially all these corporations shipping all their stuff on the railways and airplanes on our roads, and I expect not to pay for that to get those roads fixed. So, though, want to transition into talking about IRAs versus Roth conversions. Now, this is pretty big. The traditional IRAs versus Roth conversions, okay? Because right now, there's a lot of conversation out there, people recommending Roth conversions to people. And you may encounter a touch of the financial skepticism because a lot of people are like, should I roll over? Should I not? But when they hear about the Roth, whether it is when your earnings and profits are tax-free, people's eyes light up. But there's more things to consider. There's more ramifications that you must be thinking about before you get into this.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in this thing. So, if you want to consider rolling your IRA into a Roth, you might want to think about it now. A couple of reasons. Tax rates are lower now, are historically low right now, and they're probably going to be going up in the future. Obviously, nobody knows for sure, but they are pretty low right now. And you have things like Social Security running out of money in 2034. You just have a lot of reasons why taxes may go up. The other reason you may want to consider a Roth conversion, is that most people's IRA values have shrunk. for example, if you had $1 million back in November of 2021, it's probably worth about $850,000 now. And so if you were to do a Roth conversion, the value of your portfolio is lower, and that would also in turn shrink the tax bill if you move some money over. But there are a lot of other things you have to consider when you do that, and it's several consequences and things you have to think of. One, you got to pay the tax if you do a conversion. Okay, so you got to make sure you take out enough money to pay, because when you roll over from an IRA to a Roth, that money is taxable, and depending on what state you live in, it may also be taxed. It's definitely taxed federally, but it also may be taxable from a state perspective. But it does a couple of other things. Is that it may affect your Medicare premium, because that's based on your income. So that kicks you into a higher tax bracket as far as your medical premiums. If you are drawing Social Security benefits and still working, again, that's additional income. It may affect how much Social Security you get if you have not reached full retirement age. So there's a bunch of moving parts on this thing, and if you want to consider a Roth conversion, and again, I think you're seeing a lot of advertisements for those because people are using those to get your business. That's the main reason. But you may need to talk to your tax professional and see if would be beneficial for you to do that today. And at the end of the game, once you turn 72, you're required to start taking required minimum distributions. You'll hear the term RMDs. And so what the government is saying, you've let that money grow tax-free for a number of years, but at age 72, we want you to start paying taxes on that money. So they generated a formula that explains how much you pay. And it's around 4%. So if you have $1 million in a in an IRA,
Right.
you turn 72, you have to take about 4% as income. So that would be $40,000 that would be added to your income. And again, that's going to affect your it may affect your Social Security benefits if you haven't reached full retirement. Well, at 72,
No,
you have reached full
right.
retirement age. Yeah, but it could affect your Medicare payment, because that's based on what your income is. And so all those things you have to consider. So make sure you understand all the ramifications if you decide to do a conversion.
And though there are no RMDs, required minimum distributions for Roths.
No, yeah, Roths are totally tax-free. And the other big thing to consider, and it's kind of hit in my head, if the taxes that your heirs have to pay when you die, if it's in a Roth, the tax effect on whoever inherits that money is much less than they would be on the person who inherits a non IRA. So that's something else to consider. If you convert it to a Roth, the tax consequences for whoever inherits that money are much less.
Explain that a little bit clearer, Dope. Can you?
Okay, so if I have a Roth and I die, the money goes to my whoever is going to inherit the money. The tax consequences are much less. They're minimal. Okay, but an IRA, if it goes to your spouse, she can roll the money over. But if it goes to your kids, they got 10 years to take that money into their income. And in most cases, your kids are going to be, if things work out well, your kids are going to be in their higher earning years. And so you die, they get that money plopped into their income. That's going to create a pretty hefty tax bill for them. So if it was in a Roth, the tax bill would be much less for them than if it was in an IRA.
Thanks, Doug. Now, whenever you contribute to a Roth, there is a 5-year clock that starts ticking on any growth you experience with the money you put into the account. That clock begins on January the 1st in the year that you make the first contribution into the Roth. That was what I said. So it starts at January the 1st. The clock starts ticking. And any interest you gain from your Roth remains hands off until 5 years pass. But I mean, hands off is you can get it, but if you get it and you withdraw it before the 5 years, it's going to be taxed. So there's a 5-year clock that starts ticking on Roths.
Yeah, and if you take it early, it's a 59.5% penalty too. But notice the important thing, Bob, is if you pull it out, only the earnings on that money would be taxable, not the original contribution.
Very
And
good
so,
point.
yeah, that 5-year clock, a lot of people are scared because they think, well, I won't be able to get my money within 5 years. That only applies to the earnings. And if you take the example of you got $1 million put away, and I mean, you got $1 million and you roll that over to a Roth, you can pull out $1 million over the next 5 years, and there are no tax consequences because that's the original contribution. So as long as you're pulling out the original contribution, there are no tax consequences. The tax consequences only apply to earnings or growth on that money.
Right. And you can't take it out 5 years. You take it out before then it becomes taxed.
Right.
Uh-oh.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Hey, Dope, quick comment. Our friend Robin, who always been checking us out, she said, I got it only because I've been reading. But man, guys, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is. And hopefully, if it does anything, it'll make you do research and figure out what you need to do. Because we talk about this all the time. This is the first time through for most of us. You can't ask your parents because they probably didn't have IRAs or
Mine ain't a lot.
didn't have, right. Well, I'm here visiting my mother now. She's 102, but so her financial advice, I wouldn't ask for that from her right now. But it's our first time through this, and there are a lot of mistakes to be made. And the point we're trying to stress, we're trying to give you a little bit of information so there's a lot to research. There's a lot of moving parts, and we'd hate to see you miss out or get a big tax bill because you didn't know any of this. So hopefully this will strike something in you to make you go out and if you need to do something along these lines, you'll do some research or you'll hire a professional to help you navigate through this complicated situation.
Okay, on you, Dope.
Pardon me?
On you, my brother.
Okay, and the other thing, there's a lot of marketing schemes out there. Again, I think I've mentioned this before, trying to get you to convert to a Roth. If you don't understand it or don't want to do it, don't do it. Make sure it makes sense for you and your particular situation. Look at your tax rate, go from there. It's so easy for people to try to make it sound like something that it isn't. Like, oh, you got this big tax bill waiting for you. Well, you didn't pay tax on the money in the first place because you deferred it. So you're going to have to pay tax at some point. You just need to figure out the optimal time to do that, the best time for you. Don't fall for that just because some guy wants to get his hands on your money. Make sure it makes sense for you.
And remember, you can't, if you withdraw these gains before 59.5, there is a penalty that is also tacked on to the tax bill. So we just want to remind you of that particular point. And go ahead.
No, there's just so much to this to understand. And like the comment, it's a lot, but hopefully we've given you some of the terms that are used. So if you sit down and talk to somebody or you decide to do the research yourself, you'll have an idea of what you need to do. there's just a lot of moving parts, and we want to make sure you're at least prepared to handle this. Because again, like Bob and I said, when we were doing it, we had no idea what the tax rates were going to be when we turned 65, or how much we have at this point. And so it's another one of those situations where we kind of lucked out. Things kind of fell our way. The stock market grew tremendously for us, and we were able to do quite well. And so I don't mind paying taxes at some point, but I'm going to look for ways to minimize that. What I'm going to do personally is start converting to a Roth up to a certain point. So I stay within the tax bracket that I want to stay within, and I'll start converting a little by little before I get to 72, just to lower the total amount where I will have to withdraw when I turn 72. So that's personally what I'm going to do. I'm going to start moving a little bit from my IRAs to a Roth each year until I turn 72.
Right. So though, let's look at a hypothetical situation to better understand the 5-year rule. Imagine you've been contributing to a Roth IRA over several years, and you have $50,000 in the account, and you also decided to convert a traditional IRA to a Roth, and after tax end up with $300,000 in that Roth account, right? Bringing your total Roth account to $350,000. Found you have some growth in these accounts, say $50,000, bring the new total up now to $400,000. The example in this that you'll just be paying is the taxes on the growth, and the money that you had rolled over, you have to pay taxes on that. But that total account had grown to like a new total of $400,000, but you only have to be paying a particular amount on the part that was taxable, that was tax deferred. That's all you had to pay on that amount, rolling it over.
Yeah, the amount that it grew, the growth.
The growth, excuse me. Yes, the amount that it grew.
Yeah. So hopefully we've given you a good idea of what's available, and you have to look at your situation and figure out what you need to do. And it's, again, another situation where you may need to talk to a professional to best figure out what's your path forward if you do have a lot of money in your IRA account, because at 72 you're going to have to deal with it, and you might want to start doing something early. So hopefully we've given you some things to think about.
And remember, you and your heirs are going to have to pay taxes at some point. Just do your best to minimize your taxes. You need help, get it. We can't, you can't know all of this, especially when it comes to taxes, y'all. And that's why I reiterate, me and Dote, we are not tax accountants, although Dote is a CPA, he's a certified public accountant. But we're not knowing your particular tax situation, we can't advise on that. But we can give you the information that you could go and ask a tax advisor to make sure that you're not paying more taxes than you will have to. That's the name of the game. We're not saying you're not going to pay no taxes, but just don't pay more taxes than you have to. That's the name of the game.
Right.
So
let's bring it home.
Yes. And you talked about the moving parts, right? In advising, right? Cool. So before I go to that, Dote, I want to give our normal shout out. And oh my God, we got our constant viewer and supporter, loyal Joanne Skinner and Motor Steen Johnson out there, and my young brother, Carl Chapman, says, good evening, fellas. I already mentioned Robin Denise Roberts, one of Woodrow Wilson's finest, has been on, and Rodney Madison Sr. He's the Note Experience, he said, is here. Check out his site, thenoteexperience.com. Learn more about holding mortgage notes, which is another great investment that has taxable consequences. check out thenotexperience.com, and Rodney can tell you more about it and get an understanding. My wonderful sister Linda Sy is out there. Thank you for tuning in. Joe Finelli, thank you for stopping by. My other sister Nolia Melton, what's up, Nolia? As always, thank you, my dear, for tuning in. And Kitty Cheney out there. All right, Kitty. And we got quite a few people. Oh, dope. Guess who is out? Our Penn State alumnus, Sharon Streety. And you know Sharon, that used to hang around with Pat and Rita. In other words, Smoking Joe's girlfriend. She gonna kill me.
Hey,
she gonna kill me.
That was my buddy.
Yes. Oh, Sharon. Oh, and Sharon is like some kind of high ranking in the military. I forgot. Put it in the comment box, Sharon, if you're still listening, what your rank is. I know you up there. Don't be all modest and shy like you are, but put in the comment box so I'll get you a particular ranking and what part of the military you're in. I see something up there though. She's like
hey, Bob, and you know what's funny? I think she helped me with my acceptance letter to the job I took.
Get out of here.
It's kind of crazy. I believe she did. She'll have to tell me if she remembers that.
Well, I hope she remembers, because it had to be at least about 50 years ago.
46.
God, I know it was close to that. All right, dope. Let's go to the summary and takeaways. Just to sum it all up, what we talked about today, folks. We want to make sure that you're, just to recap, because like Robin said, it's a lot of information, though. A lot of information. And I just want to start off by saying, optimize your savings allocation. And remember, we talked about where you put your savings at. Okay? Consider that, how much you have, how much you need in cash, and how much you need to be put into retirement. And then remember, we talked about asset location, where you put it to get the best tax efficiency out of your situation.
Hey, Bob, let me stick to that one for a minute. And because that one is a little confusing too. But what that means, if you were going to invest in something that you expected to grow tremendously, you'd much rather have it in a tax-deferred account as opposed into a taxable account, so you wouldn't have to pay taxes on that capital gain. If it was in a tax-deferred account, that money could grow. So that would be more tax efficient, to have it in something where you didn't have to pay that big capital gains tax bill immediately. You could defer that to down the road. That's what he's talking about there.
Exactly.
The next one is understand the ramifications of tax deferral. It's tax deferral. It's not means you don't have to pay it. You're going to have to pay it at some point. Make sure you're in a position to pay it when the bill is due.
And consider if a Roth conversion works for you. I mean, it may not work for everybody, but really sit down, think about the things we talked about, understand the impact that it will have on your taxes, both income-wise, investment-wise. Just really, really, it's no one size fit all. Just remember that. There's no one size fit all, and you just need to make the right decision for your situation, for your financial plans, for your time horizon.
Yeah, understand your own financial situation so you can minimize your tax bill. You don't want to pay a penny more than you have to, and you don't want to be retired and have a gigantic tax bill if it can be avoided. So it's another one of those things. You got to take the time to understand. If you need to get help, go get help. You don't want to pay $1 more in taxes than you have to, but you don't want to pay $1 less than you owe.
That is so true. And that's our presentation for today. We'd like to thank everybody who tuned in. And remember, you can actually share on Facebook Live and in YouTube if anybody missed this, or there was some information that you didn't understand or that you missed, like Kitty came on and said she missed some of the presentation. You can go back out there and look at it out there on our site, the FITT Show on Facebook and the FITT Show on YouTube. FITT, Financial Information for Today and Tomorrow. And you can get that information. So if you missed out on it, but make sure we say this, and we can't emphasize this enough. Share this information with your family, your friends, because a lot of people only know what they know, you all. Just like Doe said, we didn't grow up. We actually the generation that are really just getting this information. So it's important that you pass it down, you all. It's so important. Don't just hold it for yourself. So with that, don't you have any other remarks?
No, God willing, we'll be back next Thursday.
Same back channel, 8 p.m. The FITT Show, FITT, financial information for today and tomorrow, helping our people get their finances in shape. Love y'all much. Thanks again for your